My name is Ambroz, and I'm currently a country economist with IGC Tanzania.
What do you do in IGC Tanzania?
Basically, country economists, they run the country offices. IGC, which is the International Growth Center, has about 15 country offices around sub-Saharan Africa and in Asia. And the country economist is responsible for making sure that all of the research projects in country happen and go smoothly. They also seek out new opportunities for research, like we do a lot of talking with policymakers. We also disseminate research results, so we're constantly in dialogue with all the various stakeholders, and basically make sure that the office doesn't burn down. I guess my path was relatively straightforward in the sense that I became interested in development economics very early. I was probably 18. It was my first year of university. I immediately switched from my current major to economics, and I ended up graduating from the American University in DC in economics and mathematics. During my time at AU, I actually also interned at the International Food Policy Research Institute, or IFPRI. I was interning in the communications division, and so I learned a lot about just how do you translate research results into plain English and into something which is, attractive and resonant to a bunch of different audiences. After that, I applied to grad school. I got into Oxford's MPhil program in economics. That's a 2-year program. And while I was doing that, again, I was focusing on development, even though the MPhil is it's straight economics, so it's everything. But I focused on development, and I was encouraged, like a lot of the other development students, to apply to the ODI fellowship. So I did, and I was accepted, and I was sent to Fiji. So for 2 years I was in Fiji. I was a resource economist working with an intergovernmental regional organization based in Fiji. We covered a bunch of different Pacific Island countries though, and we were basically like the Ministry of Environment. So I was doing benefit cost analyses of like dredging sand from lagoons in Tuvalu, or what are the different water supply options in Niue, and just sort of all these different things that had to do with both sustainability and development to some extent. It was a lot of fun, and I highly recommend the ODI fellowship. And so following that, I decided that it would be good to get more involved in really rigorous academic research. So I applied to the Poverty Action Lab, which is JPAL, and I ended up being hired, and I was put on a project in Hyderabad in India working on the impact evaluation of microfinance. This turned into a popular paper called The Miracle of Microfinance. And it was a wonderful exposure to sort of surveys and randomization and how do you, monitoring and evaluation and all of that, and I really enjoyed that. And so following that, I was actually promoted to research manager. So that meant going to JPAL Global, which is located at MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I was there for 3 years, and I did sort of everything. I did capacity building, like teaching people how to do RCTs. I did policy dissemination again, writing up RCT results into glossy briefcases. I also helped on different RCTs in India, so I went to Bihar and I went to Delhi. I just sort of did anything and everything that was thrown my way, and it was a great opportunity, and I think JPAL is also a great place to work. So after that, after 3 years at JPAL Global, my partner and I decided to move to East Africa, and so I ended up getting the job with IGC, which was really serendipitous because in many ways IGC does a lot of the same stuff that JPAL does. So it was a very easy thing to sort of slip into, and a very easy role to just immediately, sort of hit the ground running. I guess the main difference with IGC and JPAL is that IGC looks at non-randomized impact evaluations as well. It does all sorts of economic research, and obviously in my role I'm focusing only on Tanzania rather than anywhere and everywhere. I have a few tips. I should also preface this by saying that I actually helped with the hiring process at JPAL, so I have seen a lot of CVs, I've seen a lot of cover letters and writing samples. So my tips come from that. So the first tip is to figure out what kind of work you would like to do and what inspires you and what you like genuinely. This seems obvious, but I think that sometimes people get swept along more from inertia or more from outside influences. But you do have to think about, it's your career, it's your life. So pick something that you like. This can also include, I think, thinking about what type of organization you'd like to work in. So would you like to work in an NGO, or a government, or a for-profit business, or anything in between? And you can try all of these and sort of figure them out for yourself. My second tip is to, I guess, always be thinking about the skills that you'll need for a bunch of different jobs. Just constantly, when you're working, when you're studying, think about skills in a very practical and concrete way. And so the types of skills, I guess, that I mean, apart from the things that you're taught in your economics course, which are very important, obviously, but they're going to be sort of the abstract and the theoretical. They're going to be the motivation behind your work, but in terms of your day-to-day, you might be doing things like working in Stata. So it will be useful to know what Stata is and how to use it. Another obvious thing is work on your writing. I think it's incredibly, you may understand economics, but if you're not a very good communicator, that won't come through. And so it's incredibly important to just figure out how to write well, and also how to schmooze well, just dealing with people. Development is obviously a career that will make you interact with lots of different types of people from all over the world. And so that means being, I guess, culturally sensitive, being, easygoing, being nice, being friendly, and all of that. Another tip is also something that I saw in a lot, actually, of the applicants that would come to JPAL, in the first round of our annual recruiting drive, was they weren't entirely clear on who we were, like who is JPAL, what we did, and what we were looking for. And that sort of, I guess, ignorance about the positions that you're applying to really, really looks bad at the application stage. So, I understand people apply to many jobs at the same time, but it's worth so much to invest that time and figure out, looking at a position, if it's a good fit for you, if it makes sense, and how you fit into it. So do some background research on the organization and on the types of people that have worked there, and what they've done after and before. I think that will be incredibly helpful, and it really comes through in your application then. And I guess my last tip, which is more in general for development, a lot of people, especially when they're early days, and a bit naive and young, and I certainly did this a lot, is you tend to romanticize certain things. You might romanticize poverty, you might romanticize a certain region. I am very guilty of romanticizing India to a bad degree. And at times this can be helpful. So for example, my romanticization of India led me to learn Hindi. And that's incredibly useful, and also I love speaking Hindi. But ultimately it is, it's not realistic, it's indulgent, and it's also, I think, very Orientalist. If you don't know what Orientalist means, you should look it up. I think it's integral to development. It's a pitfall. You can also just watch Lawrence of Arabia. I think that's a good shorthand for Orientalism. So that would be my final tip, is as much as possible also try to fight these very natural urges to romanticize what you're doing, to be really idealistic, and I don't mean to dampen your passion, but just think about it more in terms of policy making, and think about it more in terms of a social good that's agnostic about where it's going to happen. And I guess that's it in terms of my tips.